Welcome to the Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. Let's get to it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Judy Morgan, and you are listening to Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. My guest today inspires me. Dr. Rick LeCouteur is from Australia. Based on a childhood spent immersed in the rustic charm of rural Australia, Rick's love for animals blossomed into a lifelong career as a veterinarian, educator, and advocate for animal well-being. Currently, as Director of Education for a company dedicated to introducing people to the wonders of wildlife in remote locations, Rick shares his love and knowledge of animals with enthusiasts of all ages. Through the telling of stories crafted to inspire love, understanding, and advocacy for wildlife, Rick's journey has evolved beyond clinics and teaching into the enchanting realm of children's literature. And I love this because I've actually written a few children's books, but I can't get my husband to illustrate them. So if you'd all like to put in the comments, hey, Hugh, do the illustrations, maybe I'll get somewhere. So, Dr. Rick, thank you so much for agreeing to be on. And before we got started, we were talking a little bit about how you started writing children's books. So tell our audience how you started doing this, because I think it's amazing.
It's great to be here, Dr. Judy, and welcome to all your listeners. So I was a veterinarian from the age of 6 and retired in 2015 and spent more time with my grandchildren, just like you, Dr. Judy. And during that time with my grandchildren, I realized that they had a rather biased view of the natural world. They saw penguins driving motor cars and eating pizza and living in houses. And when I quizzed them about the real habitat of penguins, they were a little bit deficient. So I determined I would write books for them that were more authentic or realistic versus the whimsical, and so started to write books for them, and the rest is history. It's gone on. I want to share my books now with as many young readers as I possibly can, because I think the next generation, your grandchild and mine, will be the stewards of the environment, the keepers of biodiversity, and they'll be the ones taking care of our planet, no matter what we leave them in the way of a planet that's much in need of attention. So that was my motivation. It's still my motivation. And I can't tell you what a brilliant expenditure of my time it has become. I was a very busy specialist neurologist and neurosurgeon for many, many years, retired, and started to do what I really wanted to do, which is write and take photographs of wildlife and illustrate books. So, Hugh, if you're listening, I'm sure you can do a lot better job of illustrating children's books than I can, and we need to chat.
Yeah, he started out as an architect, and he's a retired architect. So he's great at designing houses. He designed our house. And so we've been together for 17 years, and I've been begging him to do paintings for me because he does pen and inks that are just amazing. And he'll just pick up a book and just start doodling and make these amazing things. And I'm like, okay, well, I want artwork on the walls. And he just absolutely has refused. And finally, maybe about a year and a half ago, I got a painting. And now he's been doing a lot of watercolors and just dabbling with different things. So now he makes like all my birthday cards and anniversary cards and stuff. So I finally have gotten him to actually finish something on paper. So I might be in a better place now.
Things are moving in the right direction.
They are. He's at least letting me see some artwork. So I think this is fascinating. And, first of all, neurology and neurosurgery. Oh my gosh. That's one of those jokes that you tell like this. It's not brain surgery. And you actually do that. So, wow.
Yeah, I was an academic veterinarian for most of my life, teaching students and residents and interns, and learned more from all of them than I ever taught them, I can honestly say. But it was a wonderful career. But it was time when I hit my mid-60s to do something else. And I don't like the word retirement very much, Dr. Judy. I think you will agree with me based on our conversations that retirement should be erased from our language and replaced with starting over, because
Exactly.
I think that's what is most exciting. And
Well,
so I'm
and I think we have to start over. Otherwise, what am I going to do? Sit home and twiddle my thumbs? So this is my retirement. When I retired from clinics, I was like, woohoo, I'm retired in 2020. And so, I was like, I'm never going to have payroll again. I don't have to worry about employees. And now Naturally Healthy Pets has about 15 employees.
Wow.
And we've grown into this huge company. And I'm like, oh, well, so much for that retirement.
Yeah, but it's so important what you're doing and what your company is doing, and I applaud you for all that. And we've had conversations about this, you and I, and I'm totally on board with alternative approaches or complementary approaches to traditional care. I think there's room for all of that, just
Absolutely.
as there is hopefully room for me in the world of children's picture books.
Well, there's so many out there, and I can tell you that my granddaughter, oh my gosh, the number of books that child has. My mother, her great grandmother, was a reading specialist and taught first grade for over 30 years. So, books are pretty important in our world. My mother is going to be 87. Are you 87 or 88?
I'm 87.
Okay, she's going to be 88 soon. And she reads about a book every 2 days, like big novels. She's just, reading is just something. I was the kid growing up. I would read with a flashlight under the covers, and try to hide from my parents. And my favorite Christmas gifts were, the whole series of books. Oh, I got number 99 in the series. This is awesome. And so reading has just been huge for us. And, now I've become an author and I've written 8 books, but they're all like, medically holistic things. And I would just love to get into the world of the children's books as well, because you are right. There are studies that I have read where they take kids from the inner city who have never been to a farm and they've never seen a farm animal. And, they say to them, well, how big is a cow? And they're like, oh, a cow's like, this big. It fits on the picture book page. They think a cow is about 4 inches tall. And, so then when they get out of the city and they go actually see a real live cow, it's like, oh, and wow, look at that. The cow can't drive a car and the penguin can't drive a car. And so I think you're right. And I have bought a lot of, particularly when I go on vacation to fun places like Yellowstone, and we did a out west canyon tour this past year. And so in all the gift shops, I was always buying those books for her that had the real animals in them, like they would draw the animals in their real life habitats and talk about, like I buy picture books that are like, and who does this poop belong to? Oh, that's a raccoon's poop.
Fantastic. Well, books, you're an avid reader and from a family of avid readers, and books are so important, particularly you've suggested one aspect where kids don't get out into nature like you and I used to. My parents used to say, and your mum can probably identify with this, my parents would say, come back before dark.
Yes.
And that was about it. And I was safe out there roaming through the forest and looking for birds and creatures and insects and everything. These days, kids have to be a little bit careful. And so their access to the outdoors is limited. Plus, they've tried to replace that with, of course, screen time, which is a double-edged sword as well. I don't want my books to become ebooks. The publicist I work with is very keen that I should do that. But I want my books to be read on a lap or in a bed next to a parent or a teacher or a carer, and where they can stop and ask questions and point at the pictures. And this balance between authentic and whimsical is really, really important. As I've said already, similar to the balance between traditional approaches to veterinary medicine and the holistic approaches to veterinary medicine. They complement one another, and certainly picture books complement screen methods of exposing kids to nature, but picture books also complement the more traditional methods of education about nature, going outside, looking in a bird's nest. Kids don't have that access these days, much as the pity. But and that's what I feel my books address. That's a niche, if you like. I've read a lot over the past 10 years because during my years as a veterinary neurosurgeon, I was also a researcher. I had a brain tumor research lab, and so I had to read everything as it came out. And I'm still a researcher at heart, although not into science and medicine as much as into children's picture books. And there are wonderful studies, psychological studies in the literature, controlled studies, prospective studies that address this whimsical versus realistic approach for kids. And they all come to the conclusion that the balance is what matters, and that if kids are going to become future nature lovers, advocates for conservation and biodiversity, and wildlife lovers, they must have that balance. They must know that penguins live in Antarctica and have a very tough life, and that they don't eat pizzas, they eat krill. And what's a krill? And they need to know what a krill is, because that's the basis of all of that marine life surviving. So, yeah, there's room for my books as well as Dr. Zeus and Beatrix Potter and all of the other ones.
Absolutely. You are so correct. We need to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about Rick's newest book and some of his others that he's written. We'll be back in just a minute.
If you were not able to join us for our recent International Naturally Healthy Pets experience that was held in Orlando, Florida, either in person or virtually, boy, did you miss an amazing event. 7 keynote speakers that did not disappoint. The good news is that we are offering all of the presentation recordings to podcast listeners and get 15% off. The esteemed speakers include Dr. Peter Tobias, Dr. Barbara Fougere, Dr. Nick Thompson, Dr. Connor Brady, Dr. Brendan Clark, Drs. Curran and Steve Marsden, and Dr. Barbara Royal. What a lineup! Be sure to listen in on all of these incredible presentations today at drjudyu.com and use code podcast63 for 15% off. As pet lovers, we want to protect our furry friends from common pests like fleas, ticks, and heartworms. However, many commercial and prescription products contain toxic chemicals that can have serious side effects and long-term health and environmental risks. Dr. Judy's book, Protecting Your Pet from Parasites, is an Amazon bestseller, a comprehensive, holistic guide that explores the dangers of toxic chemicals and the importance of safe, effective flea and tick prevention and treatment. Order yours at naturallyhealthypets.com and use code podcast63 for 20% off. That's code podcast63 for 20% off your copy of Protecting Your Pets from Parasites on naturallyhealthypets.com.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Judy Morgan, your host of the Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. My guest today, Dr. Rick LeCouteur, is a retired veterinary neurosurgeon. He really is one of those brain surgeon guys. That's so cool. But he is spending his rejuvenation, not his retirement. He's reimagined himself as a children's book author. And I'm in awe because I think this is great. Now, how many books have you written?
I've written 5. 3 of them are now available on Amazon.
Great. So
and they're all about animals.
All about animals, and like real animals. And so your most recent one is Nasty Names Are Hurtful. An Australian White Ibis responds to name calling in the city. So first, okay, so we took this bird out of the country and now he's in the city. So
yeah, there's the cover of the book, and you can see the Australian White Ibis with the long curved beak for delving down into the mud of the wetlands to find beetles and worms. By the way, he's a magnificent bird. The lead character the proponent in my book is actually a female named Penny. But this is a wonderful bird. It has a little sensory organ, a little sensor at the end of it, at the tip of its beak, where it can sense vibration. And it's amazing to watch it plunge its beak into the mud and pause and then come back with a beetle. This is an incredible bird. And as you said, Dr. Judy, this bird, through no fault of its own, ended up as an environmental refugee in Australia. Back in Egyptian days, this bird was revered, worshipped. As a matter of fact, there was a god with an ibis head called Thoth, Thoth, who was the god of the universe. The Egyptians lived in harmony with this bird, and indeed, this bird was in Australia before people arrived. The Australian Aboriginals were the first to arrive there, and they also worshipped this bird. They lived in harmony with this bird. And then people that look a little bit like you and me arrived in Australia, and they started agriculture. They dried up the wetlands, and this bird almost became extinct.
Oh, geez.
However, a shout out for zoos. There was a population in a couple of zoos in Australia, and that's all that was left of this vast population of birds. And the birds escaped from the zoo, found the parks in the big cities, and thrived.
Really?
So it's really true. They're in every city in Australia now. They've just made their way over to the very westernmost coast of Australia. How they did that, I don't know, but they are excellent flyers, even though people think of the ibis as being stationary in a swamp. And so this bird is truly to be admired. And yet, in the city, where it's a refugee, kids call it names, throw stones at it, and chase it. And if you want to see that on the most popular animated cartoon, you can watch it on Bluey. There's an episode of Bluey where Bluey, bless her heart, chases an ibis and calls it names like bin chicken. A bin in Australia is a trash can, or picnic pirate, or flying rat. Very derogatory terms.
Aww.
And so this book is about an ibis who talks to her parents about the nasty names and the chasing and the derogatory behavior of kids in the cities. And the parents give her great advice. And so it's a story about name calling, but it's also a shout out for the ibis, who is a magnificent bird. And there are some instructions at the end for what kids can do. The first one is just stop and watch an ibis for half an hour and see what you learn, because they're wonderful parents. They're wonderful citizens. The only reason they eat rubbish is because humans make it available to them.
Right.
Humans are behind all of this. And so that's the story I want to get across to these kids in Australia. But of course, the message resonates around the world. And there's a picture from the book to give you an idea of what the book looks like. And
your drawings are beautiful. Wow.
Well, thank you. They're derived from my photographs. And so they're very, very authentic. And here's one of a person having a picnic and actually feeding the ibis. One of the instructions I give to the kids is, please don't feed the ibis. And I give them ideas about how they can advocate for reestablishing wetlands in Australia. And so many ideas. There's also a section at the back of the book which tells parents the story, so that when kids ask questions, the parents are equipped to give authentic answers. So all my books have this same sort of structure to them. And so far they're all about birds. But Dr. Judy, I have written a couple about mammals. I've got one about cheetahs, and coming out, I hope, next year. And so all wildlife.
Very cool.
it's a
Now,
privilege to bring
is
this
most of your wildlife, your books, are they mostly Australian wildlife, or is it?
No, they're animals in their natural habitat. So
Okay.
The first one I wrote was about a flightless cormorant from the Galapagos Islands, and then
Oh, cool.
the second one I wrote was about penguins, and of course they're from Antarctica. The one after the Ibis book, set in Australia, the one after that is going to be about an African bird, a little red-billed oxpecker, which is a tiny little bird. It's called the tick bird, and it removes ticks from all the mammals, and it makes friends with a big rhinoceros. And the message there is, of course, you don't have to look like another person to be their friend. And here's the unlikely friendship of a little tiny bird and a great big rhinoceros, and their common ground is the tick, which is a parasite for the big creature and a meal for the little creature.
How perfect. How perfect. I love it. I love it. It's very cool. So how do you get your ideas? Like, what's your inspiration?
Oh, that's a revealing question, which I must answer now that it's been asked. My inspiration is from the animals themselves, of course, and I've been so privileged the last 10 years since retirement to take small groups of people around the world to observe wildlife with a company that I'm director of education for, which is called Veterinary Expeditions.
Oh, cool.
And so that's enabled me to see the wildlife and to take photographs. And like everybody who takes photographs, I became better and better, and I now call myself a conservation photographer, not a wildlife photographer. That's the pinnacle. That would be beyond my abilities. But I'm a conservation photographer, meaning I take photographs to send messages to people and to kids. So there's a purpose to my photographs. But as I took the photographs, like everybody out there, I thought, what should I do with them? And then this circumstance with my grandchildren, where they didn't know anything about penguins, caused me to think, I've got lots of photos of penguins. Let's turn that into a book, and the rest is history. But it was circumstance after circumstance. I think life is like that. For me, it has been, and it's a matter of seeing what's in front of you and trying to take advantage. That sounds a little mercenary, but trying to make the most of the opportunities. And so these opportunities of grandchildren and wildlife and conservation were in front of me. And so I put them all together and have found my true vocation. I've got to tell you, I wake up in the morning with 10 things that I have to write down every day. And I wake up earlier and earlier and earlier and go to bed later and later and later. And there just isn't enough time. Your mum will understand perfectly that when you're passionate about something, you begin to worry about the time passing because you know there's so much inside waiting to get out. And will there be time? Well, I hope that I pass away with a pen in my hand. I really do.
Well, hopefully that won't be anytime soon. I think there's lots more stories in there. But you are so right. I mean, I am in the position I am in now because things just kept getting thrown in my path. And it's like, why is that there? What does that have to do with me? And I don't even know what to do with this. And it's funny because, I've even had coaches and mentors that have said, oh, you need to be doing this. And I'm like, no, not doing that. And the next year I meet with them again. And it's like, no, you need to be doing this. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And then the next year I'm like, don't even bring that up. And then the next year it's like, oh crap, I'm doing that.
Yeah, but there's a message there for young children too, and for parents and for grandparents and even great grandparents. And that is, how will your child know what's out there if you don't tell them about it? In other words, if a famous violinist was never given a violin, you would never know that he or she was a famous violinist.
Famous violinist, exactly.
And so for me and for you, it's being exposed to opportunities and perhaps like you resisting them at first, but ultimately saying, I want to try that. I'll give it a go.
Hey, look at that. It worked.
Sometimes it works, but failure is a great teacher too. You know?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah,
I've had many of those.
Yeah, failure. I like to think of failure the following way. Failure is a reality. Failure happens to all of us, and perhaps not failure, but setbacks. It's not what happens, it's how you handle it. And how you handle it is going to develop into resilience. Mm-hmm. And I think resilience is one of the most amazing of human characteristics. Not everyone has it, but anyone can develop it.
It's true. And, I keep seeing these things that it says, the guy who ends up on, or the person who ends up on top is the person who kept getting up every time they fell down. It's just, that's the way it is. And we are all going to have those times where there's a stumble, there's a veered off course. But we all have the ability to kind of correct course as well. And I think it is amazing that you have found this incredible passion for your re-envisioning your life. Your passion is obvious that, and I'm actually going to go find your blogs, and I'm going to go find all your books. I think this is great. And I think all of our children need to learn about the real world of animals. And I particularly love the one with the tick bird, because, it just shows, it's one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's like, oh, great. I want to eat those ticks. And the big animal's like, oh my God, I can't stand these things. So maybe we all need some tick birds for those of us who live in high tick areas with our dogs with Lyme disease and all those things. So maybe we can import some of those.
Damage when they remove the tick. They also like just a little bit of sauce, which is blood on the tick, but and they're maligned for that. But their motives are very pure. They want to remove the tick and they want to have a meal. So I won't hear any bad words about them. And your words are so true, Dr. Judy. I'm just thinking of my favorite 3 words. And I used to tell my students, and I tell my grandchildren, all 3 of these words begin with P, to see if they're listening. So let me try them on you. Patience, persistence, and time. 3 Ps. Yeah, I think you've got it. And so if the little kids don't say, but time doesn't begin with P,
right.
I know I have some work to do on the listening side.
There you go. I was sitting there thinking, okay, there's a joke here somewhere. Like, how are we spelling time?
Don't think too hard. I'm a mile wide and a quarter of an inch deep. So there's no depth to what I'm saying, perhaps.
I love it. We are out of time. This has been really fun. And I'm so inspired. I love what you were doing. I'm going to go home and tell my husband it's about time to start putting, pen to paper or paintbrush to paper, whatever it is he's going to do. Because this is really fun. And I think that our grandchildren deserve more and more and more books, and good books. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. If Hugh is listening to the end here, because he's taken a few knocks during this, I'm going to give him a little piece of advice, which is totally unsolicited and from somebody who's not an expert, but it's a well-known saying in American present-day culture: happy wife, happy life.
Yes, that is true. Well, I'm finally getting some paintings for me, at least. So whether they ever get to a book, I don't know. But anyway, well, thank you, Dr. Rick. Just amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. Your passion is contagious, and clearly you enjoy it and you love your grandchildren. And I'm so glad that they were such a great inspiration to you to make this happen. So thank you very much for being my guest. This has been very enjoyable.
Thank you for having me. And thanks to all your listeners if they've made it to the end.
They do.
Thanks for listening to another great Naturally Healthy Pets episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for some helpful links. And if you enjoy the show, please be sure to follow and listen for free on your favorite podcast app. We value your feedback and would love to hear from you on how we're doing. Visit drjudymorgan.com for healthy product recommendations, comprehensive courses, upcoming events, and other fantastic resources. Until next time, keep giving your pet the vibrant life they deserve.
The purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a veterinarian, licensed nutritionist, or other qualified professional. You're encouraged to do your own research and should not rely on this information as professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Dr. Judy and her guests express their own views, experience, and conclusions. Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets neither endorses or opposes any particular view discussed here.